When it became clear that this was a good idea, or at least a feasible idea, was just seeing the disconnect between what brands are doing on a typical basis and what the rest of the internet is doing. It's this really weird time because you have all these really interesting new creative voices online, and they're giving themselves a platform, and they're starting YouTube channels or podcasts, and they're able to, bring their art to way more people than have ever been able to access it before. So that kind of explosion, that plethora of new voices is really exciting. At the same time, in the branding industry, you have what some people are calling an existential crisis, where they don't know how they're going to continue to reach people because the decibel level of ads has gotten to such a crazy volume that people can't hear it. They can't see it. They have banner blindness and they skip ads right away. And 95% of YouTube pre-roll ads are skipped after the 5-second marker. And you have $25 billion wasted over a couple-year period in skipped ads. And there's all these statistics that, the industry throws around. And there was a report recently, which I'll try to find for maybe the show notes, where they literally referred to the position of the modern brand as an existential crisis. We don't know how we're going to continue to try to tell people about our products in an age where the consumer has gotten so good at ignoring interruption marketing. So, and you can picture that play out over the next 5, 10, 15 years. Where's that going to go? It's only going to get harder and harder for brands to find ways to annoy us.
This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
Hey, Zach. Welcome to the Play Your Position podcast. Team PYP, you are in for a real treat today because Zack Slingsby is my guest, and he is going to take us not only on his leadership journey, but he's going to share with us ways that we can all incorporate elements of storytelling and literature and some of the things that are so close to my heart into our businesses, into our careers, so that we can make a bigger impact. We can feel better about ourselves and all the other great things. So, Zach, are you ready for kickoff?
Let's do it. Let's play.
Let's play. So, team, here's some things I know about Zach. He is a writer, a short film creator, and founder of Human Factor Media, an award-winning branded storytelling company that has worked with leading brands and publishers to create videos people actually want to watch. Zach graduated from Fordham University, received his MFA from the New School, and has published in over a dozen creative and industry publications. He believes the ingredient that makes a literary story great is the same that makes for a great video. His company is based between Nashville, Tennessee, where he lives, and New York City, collaborating with brands to create stories and films instead of ads and interruptions. Wow, what a fresh take on this whole thing, this whole internet ecosphere that's full of content. And so much of it is just noise. Zach, you are leading the charge in something that's, again, very near and dear to my heart, which is telling a really great story. So let's start with your story. When did you get the call to leadership? And take us to that time in your life when things started, you just knew that you were going to go in a direction that was going to include leading.
Well, that all sounds really nice when you say it. So maybe you could join some of our client presentations in the next few weeks and give that intro. When did I feel a call to leadership? So the company's been around about 5 years, a little more now. And I never thought of myself really as an entrepreneur. I mean, I was a creative. I had, like I said, or like you said, I had gone to the MFA program and I had been writing fiction, and I had worked, I had writing jobs in New York and in DC, and didn't particularly love any of them. And I think that the idea of leadership, I still struggle with that moniker, because usually you're the person who's trying to make something happen, and you're trying to create a vision of reality that in some way doesn't exist yet. And on a small scale, on a day-to-day level, that usually involves asking people for things. Usually you're asking someone for an opportunity, or you're asking a bunch of people to come out to a production, or you're asking for someone's time or to borrow a location. So a leader is one way to say it, but you're also a beggar, and you're also a barter. You're bartering, and you're also trying to find what is motivating other people so that you can align your goals with theirs. So when you're in the room, and let's say you're on set, everyone looks to you to make decisions. And then for a few minutes, you feel like a leader. But outside of that, you're like, I'm the person who's trying to hold this together with duct tape. So I don't know why people are looking at me that way.
That's honest. And I think you're onto something. Leadership is a funny word because it evokes all kinds of images in our minds, depending on how we were raised, what kinds of exposure to different leaders we got as children, whether our parents were leaders in business or perhaps education, or, even volunteer stuff like coaching or scouts or whatnot. And what you just said, I think, is spot on. It's half the time you're like, I'm making this up as I go along. But I do think that that's something that great leaders can do and are more interested in getting things done behind the scenes than being the star on the stage.
Yeah, I think that's right. There's a great line from Derek Sivers, can't pronounce his name, wrote a book on how he started his company called CD Baby in the 90s. Did you ever read that? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It was really good. And he says that for some people, it's not this business school decision to start a company. For some people, it's just how one thing would look in a perfect world.
Yes.
I think that is a good description of what I thought we could do. I thought, well, what if there's just a small group of creative people that were getting paid to do what we're really good at and, kind of continue to widen the market for that skill set. So it was pretty modest, damn. I didn't want to send a rocket to the moon like Elon Musk or anything like that. So I just thought, let's find budgets to be able to do what we really want to do. That was the extent of the ambition. And I realize now, reading some books from people who have done this kind of thing, that they're entrepreneurs by default. It's not like they decided they had to start a business and then try to figure out what the business was. They were either stung by an idea that they couldn't resist, or they thought that being an entrepreneur was going to be the shortest distance between 2 points. It was going to be the quickest way to achieve this thing that you had to do, either creatively or, through some other vocational calling, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. So talk about human factor media for a minute or so. What are some of the things that you get to do? Yeah.
Well, so I think just to answer your first question in this question as well, I think that when it became clear that this was a good idea, or at least a feasible idea, was just seeing the disconnect between what brands are doing on a typical basis and what the rest of the internet is doing. It's this really weird time because you have all these really interesting new creative voices online, and they're giving themselves a platform, and they're starting YouTube channels or podcasts, and they're able to, bring their art to way more people than have ever been able to access it before. So that kind of explosion, that plethora of new voices is really exciting. At the same time, in the branding industry, you have what some people are calling an existential crisis, where they don't know how they're going to continue to reach people because the decibel level of ads has gotten to such a crazy volume that people can't hear it. They can't see it. They have banner blindness and they skip ads right away. And 95% of YouTube pre-roll ads are skipped after the 5-second marker. And you have $25 billion wasted over a couple year period in skipped ads. And there's all these statistics that, the industry throws around. And there was a report recently, which I'll try to find for maybe the show notes, where they literally referred to the position of the modern brand as an existential crisis. We don't know how we're going to continue to try to tell people about our products in an age where the consumer has gotten so good at ignoring interruption marketing. So, and you can picture that play out over the next 5, 10, 15 years. Where's that going to go? It's only going to get harder and harder for brands to find ways to annoy us. So we're not going backwards, right? So that is, on the one hand, they have this sort of crisis where they don't know how to market their products. And on the other hand, you have all these new creative talents in the marketplace that are blowing people's minds with what they can do. So it seemed to us like a very intuitive marriage to find ways to pair brands with folks whose job it is to actually get attention and who could do it authentically and by earning trust and telling true stories. So our kind of credo obviously is make a video people want to watch, but we say, on a much more basic level, make a video where the goal is not to sell a product, make a video where the goal is simply to get attention and have the end viewer feel that they were not duped by giving their attention. They were not tricked. This was an authentic exchange of value here.
I'm thinking that the model of advertising didn't really change when the internet came along. It was like the old, the television model, you buy a slot, you stick it, between the content pieces of a sitcom, for example, or the news or what. I mean, having been in content marketing, that umbrella, all of us are. If you're doing business today, you are a content marketer to a degree. Now, you may not be creating the assets that are going out, but you have to be thinking about it's all swirled together. The content, your brand, the value that you bring, the exchange, the value exchange. And I think it's the interruption model was broken a long time ago. And yet people still, to your point, if billions of dollars are just getting, I think of a giant bonfire full of $100 bills, like, let's just go torch it, putting this ad out.
Such a good point. It's such a good point. The model didn't, the medium changed and the model of ads didn't change. Yeah,
no.
You're exactly right.
And so here you come along asking a very important question, which is what can we do differently? How can we, obviously businesses need to sell products. That's a given, but maybe the model needs to change. And perhaps that's why your business is succeeding, because you're coming along with a fresh take on, hey, there is a different way. Let us show you what that way looks like. And so give us, if you wouldn't mind, an example of what working with someone looks like when you do that marriage.
Yeah. So part of what everything you said is true, but part of it is adversarial still, because you're still trying to convince a group of people to do anything is difficult, because you have, as soon as there's statistics on, as soon as you introduce 5 decision makers, the probability of success goes down 10%. As soon as you introduce 7, it goes down 20%, et cetera. Right. So when you're on the forefront of a change or even riding the wave of a change, you're always getting the resistance of the status quo. And that's definitely been true in our case. But having said that, we've gotten to partner with brands that are really interested in experimenting with content on whatever scale they can afford to take that chance. So we've gotten to work with great brands, LG and Planet Fitness and Snap Discover. We do a comedy show for the New York Post. We just did a bunch of videos for mattress firm, sleep.com. Right now, so I'll give you an example of a pitch that we made this week. It was to a candle company. And so where we come in, so typically we'll be introduced to a brand, we'll come in and we'll say, we'll have ideas. We'll start the meeting with 2 or 3 concepts that we'll present to them. And we'll have done research on who they're trying to reach and what we think their kind of brand values stand for. And then try to reverse engineer that into a piece of content that we think would fit natively on these social platforms. So in other words, it's not the markers of the content are not the product features. They're more something that is a resonating factor about the end consumer. So we had an idea to, instead of doing these videos where it's exactly the model you just said, right? You open up on a kitchen and there's a candle in the middle and it's people are, where'd you get that? Oh, I got it at so-and-so, from this company, and they give me a money back guarantee and it smells like lavender and it's beautiful. Instead of doing that frame up, which we all can remember from the commercials we saw growing up, we said, let's make a series of letters written from a loved one in one state to the person who just moved away in another state. And the theme of these candles is that you send them to friends and family who've just moved to another city.
Got it.
And so, let's do this epistolary series, and each of the letters can reveal the key markers of the city that you just left. So where, you're romanticizing Chicago, you're romanticizing LA or New York. And along the way, there's always room for brand integration. It's never hard to put that, to dial that up a little bit. But the story about the person who left and why did they leave and what are their adventures and what are they experiencing and what's the nostalgia that they left behind, and all that stuff is what people care about. And then you can find a way. The safest place for the dial is at zero, where you're not trying. You're only making a story. You're putting it out there. It's coming from your branded social platform, and your brand's going to get the credit for that in the long run. They just will. We know that. I mean, that's statistically proven out. That's the safest place. Now, brands aren't always comfortable with that. Let's say, well, how about at the 90-second mark, we show the product and it's in the story, but we don't talk about it. Great. That's a brand integration that we would think of as successful. So you can play with all these dials and figure out, where the best place is for your brand. But as soon as you go into the realm of, trying to tell a story that's relatable, you've left the ad space and you're in the content space. And we think that's where you should be. Yeah.
So how do you measure the success of a campaign that you create, a story that you create?
Yeah, it's not easy.
No,
it's not. It's easy when we do a head-to-head, as we've done, where we'll say, let's make one video that's, totally interested in the consumer and one that's about the product, and we'll put them head-to-head. And we have, click-through rates and watch rates and the amount of product that was sold, things like that, the amount of followers gained. So you have to come up with, your own metrics and define a success in advance. And we think this works best as a repeat strategy. I mean, there's very few case studies where you make one great video and, it just transforms your business. That can happen. It's very rare. It's like you said at the beginning, the level of content is just so intense right now that it's very difficult to just make one video and rest on your laurels. But I think that you have to decide what your key marker is going to be. Red Bull TV, which is very successful at this, they gave an interview. They said, we care about comments. That's our number one marker. If the comments in the section are, thoughtful and inspiring, and they're paragraphs instead of sentences, and people really engage with this, we know that this branded content made a mark that people aren't going to soon forget.
Okay. So there is some latitude for the brand you're working with to say, this is how we know we're reaching the people. I mean, you think it's like at the end of the day, it's what percentage of sales did we increase? Because, if there's an outlay of money to, create a campaign in order to grow your business, and growing your business means at the end of the day, are we seeing an increase in profit? There probably are companies who have the bandwidth to say, let's just experiment over here and see what happens, but I would think a small business, medium-sized businesses, they don't necessarily have that room in the same way. So what they do needs to be as thoughtfully crafted as possible. But at the end of the day, I mean, you can't guarantee that this is going to work because nobody can. We don't know what's going to resonate. And we can guess.
And we know the alternative is not working.
Right.
So we know that. So we know what's being tried is not effective. So in most cases, and when it is, usually people are excited about a 0.02% click-through rate or something like that, right? So it's the typical statistics on this are pretty dismal. So we know that a new strategy is in order. And you're right, there are different tiers of, when you're a startup and you're trying something like this, you really want to be as methodical about the content as possible, and you want to produce your story videos, but you also want to produce videos that are right behind that are going to elaborate on your company. And so, it's not like you don't want to have any content that talks about what you do. We're not saying that. So, we're not anarchists or anything, but it's like you do want to, you just want to lead the face of your brand at this point should be treated as a stage. It should be treated as something that's there for people to come and observe and be entertained, and inspired, and spoken to, and not sit there to have to listen to what our features are, how we innovated, or what we did differently this time.
Yeah, no one cares. It's like, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? How is this going to make my life better? And you were getting at some, at being a former English teacher.
Yeah,
I'm very in tune with, archetypes and themes and metaphors. I mean, my whole show, Play Your Position, is one big metaphor, for being the best you can be, becoming the person that you need to become in order to accomplish or experience the kind of life, business, career, relationships that you actively dream about, right? And, here you are working with creatives to help tell stories. And you brought up mattresses, right? One of the most benign products, but everybody needs one. Obviously, the hotel industry, and with the rise of Airbnb, it's something that's going to sell anyway, but it's a saturated market. There's a lot of different brands. You talked about working with Mattress Firm. Could you take us inside the creative room when I imagine like in Hollywood, when the team of writers comes together and they're bouncing ideas. I mean, is that how you operate? You got a whiteboard and you've got big paper and colored pens.
It can happen that way. It can sometimes it goes that way, and it's really fun. And we also do original content. And so that's where we, really the writer's room effect takes hold. Like we're doing a web series here in Nashville in a few weeks, and we have, several versions of the script, and we have a table read this week. And so it's very fun, like, Hollywood style, production. But in the example of Mattress Firm, we were handed a brief. We were handed, well, here's what we want. The room for creativity is, here from here to here, and go and execute and come back to us. Right. So it's not always, it does work in probably a little bit less than half the time. It works where we have the idea, we convince some brand to take a chance, and we go and we execute and come back. Right. But then there's also the traditional model for branded production, which is, here's the brief. Can you execute in a creative way? Mm-hmm. And so we're, I don't know. I have to choose my words carefully because I don't want to, we don't want to, we're not averse to that. And we understand that is the way that production houses in the branded content world have been usually work with their partners to date, right? That's kind of the model. Mm-hmm. So in some ways we embrace that, and we try to be very good partners to any brand that wants to work with us. In other ways, we are trying to push for this sea change where brands are way more open to treating this like a pitch meeting, where they're way more open to treating this the way a studio would, in the days of You're in Hollywood, where you say, what do you got? And here are our 3 ideas. And here are the team that can execute. And here are the creative talents that we can work with online to do this. And, we have a creative collective of artists and writers and filmmakers and novelists. So we have all these creative talent to bring to bear for these projects. So in some ways, we're always trying to get all of that. We're always trying to push all of the kind of kitchen sink into the project. But it definitely cuts both ways.
Sure.
So what I wanted to ask you, because you just brought it up. So I've met a number of people now, and I'm obviously one of them too, who started out with a love of English, started out with a love of literature, and ended up in this hybrid world of, I don't know, entrepreneurialism,
this crazy
branding,
world.
marketing, sort of touching marketing, helping, client services. Mm-hmm. What do you feel like is the thing about people who love stories that sends them down this road? Because I was like, I'll be the first one. I was like, no, there's a lot of people who've done this. What do you think about, what's the tie in there?
Well, I think honestly, it's something primal that we don't even really have full awareness of. It's just, for me, it's the humanities, right? English is under that umbrella of the humanities, and we're all human beings. And one of the biggest struggles I had when I first entered the online space, which is around 2007, 2008, I really took an active interest in this thing called the internet, right? And social media and these emerging platforms. And I can remember distinctly talking with people that I met in different, sometimes at live events, sometimes, we'd meet online and in these networks. Coming from that background, I kept, people were like, oh, we need to focus on the algorithm and we need to focus on the metrics and everything. And I'm like, nobody cares about that at the end of the day. What we care about ultimately is we want to connect. We want to feel appreciated and acknowledged. And stories historically, and you know this, Zach, because you love it too. I think those of us, we bring our love of the richness that stories offer, whether it's through movies or books or music, poems, whatever the art, like paintings, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
But this thing called the internet came along, and it's where we gather now.
Right.
It is the ultimate campfire.
The city square.
It's the city square. It's the giant, it's Coachella. I mean, it's this place where people are always going to, at the end of the day, want the connection, the social connection. And the pandemic certainly put a big spotlight on that with the amount of loneliness. It brought to bear how isolated in an ironic way the internet has made people, because you can connect over your phone. You don't have to go meet somebody in person. And you didn't before the pandemic, but the pandemic kind of just amplified this thing. And I'm seeing, and I don't know if you are in the work you do, but I'm seeing almost, and it may tie in with my next question about the work you do. People are abandoning some of these platforms because they're so tired. They want they want the IRL. Give me IRL. I want to see somebody's face in, full color, not on a screen. I want to smell the smells in the air. I want to taste if you're at a beer festival or whatever. I mean, that's life. Life is not.
People don't know that. Yeah. And they don't know they're missing it until they come out and see it.
And that's where we're always telling stories. We're always writing our own story every day, whether you realize it or not. One of my favorite lines from a thought leader that I have followed for quite some time is, you've got to make yourself the star of your movie. Your life is your movie. Stop being the understudy, or stop waiting for somebody to call you to star. You are the star. Start writing the script.
That's great. Yeah. What do you get? What do you feel like you get from reading that you don't get from online? Like, what do you get? What does literature give you that is lacking in your experience of life through the internet?
Oh, for one, the richness of it's such a different experience to read a book or listen to a story being read, which I love. I mean, I grew up, my preferred way of learning is through my ears. Storytelling that's the thing. Stories are meant to be told. You can read them, and I love reading, don't get me wrong, but there's something about a story. And like when you go to for example, I just went a couple of weeks ago to a play here in my town. It was a Bronx Tale. Chaz Palminteri wrote that.
What a story! Yeah.
Oh my gosh! And it's funny because I had my kids with me, and
that's his life. That's his life.
It is his life. Yeah. And see, to me, I was so moved by that. And it's the musical, so it's different than the movie. But I was so moved by the story, and I think part of it is because I am a New Yorker by birth, and I understand the New York vibe. And you know what I'm talking about because you're a New Yorker too. And even more so being in the Bronx, right?
No, I grew up in Rockland County, so I don't want more credit than I deserve. But yes, my family's from the Bronx, and little known fact, possibly apocryphal, but my dad has a cousin who's my dad's whole family is from Arthur Avenue, and they lived there at the exact time that the Bronx Tale took place. And my dad's cousin purports to have been in the bar in the real life scene when the bikers were locked in, and said Chaz Palminteri had the great line where he said, I asked you to leave. They spray the beer everywhere. He locks the door. Well, now you can't leave.
Now you can't leave. That's right.
It's halftime here at the Play Your Position podcast, and we've got ourselves a great game. While you're up grabbing another snack and topping off your favorite beverage, make sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss another play. PYP is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever great podcasts can be found. Now, let's get back to the game.
My kids they're in their 20s, I asked them afterwards, I said, what'd you think? My daughter was like, well, it was a very simple story. And I said, what do you mean by that? And she goes, well, it's been done before. I'm like, yeah, so, and we got into this interesting dialogue. And I, as a parent, one of my tenets as a parent is allow my children to speak their thoughts. And it's not my place to try to tell them no, or, you're wrong or whatever, like, because it's not my worldview. I listen. And so that experience, because I'm thinking that was one of the most powerful stories I've seen. And yes, is it simple? Yeah. But I think the best stories ultimately are simple.
Yeah.
She is drawn to more complex things with a lot of avant-garde, taking liberties with characterizations and that kind of thing. And that's all well and good. That I gravitate towards the very basics. Love.
Yeah.
It's Joseph Campbell, the hero of
a thousand faces. Yeah. Well, I got a firsthand education in the avant-garde at the New School. I'll tell you that. So I don't subscribe as much. I understand the value, and I understand why. You've got like David Foster Wallace, or the author of David Markson, Wittgenstein's Mistress, who they find ways to blend the traditional story with the avant-garde, and I think that's really interesting. But it's I'm more in your camp, where I think that there's so much. Mad Men was such a simple story in a way,
yes,
right? But no one would. It would be very easy to call it complex too, and rich, because there was the depth rescues cliche. Depth rescues the convention.
Love that.
They go, the deeper you go into a ordinary character, this person's more and more like me. You're peeling back layers, and it's more obvious in a way, but it's like so obvious that it just kills you. It's like, oh, it's so obvious that it was right in front of me. I didn't even know it.
Mm-hmm. And to me, that you can look at so many of the miniseries. I mean, Game of Thrones, the same thing, basic storytelling, The Wire on HBO, phenomenal, True Blood. Yeah. Some of these, The Sopranos, right? Like, if you were to take all these and then just, put them up on a whiteboard and extracted, what is it? The essence. That's what you're getting at here, is at the end of the day, the humanity, technology just, I think, is trying in its own way to kind of take out our humanity, and we're fighting. We're saying, no, I refuse. I refuse to give up my humanity in exchange for, I don't know, ease or simplicity. I mean, we want, it may be a simple story, but to your point, the complexity that's where it's at. I mean, Our Town by Thornton Wilder, another one. And that's what's interesting to me about my daughter. She loves Our Town. I'm like, well, that's such a simple story. Yes, but Mom, it's all about, for her, it's like she wants to see a female character. Okay, great. I don't have a problem with that. But
I just the idea that there's something dehumanizing about the internet. It's you can't avoid that. That is true. And so it's very double-edged being in this world, because our business is going to, primarily online. It's not exclusively online. We think, I don't know that we would let's call it a mission. I don't think this is what we're doing right now, but I think a mission would be to inject some elements of what you're talking about that come from, what you get from literature that you don't get from your online life, and try to find some way to inject those into the content experience. And I thought I would share, I just found this quote as you were saying that dehumanizing bit. Do you ever hear of The Shallows by Nicholas Carr?
I've heard the title. I didn't know the author.
So it was written in 2008 or 9 or 10 or something like that, a while ago. But he kind of sensed what was happening to us with the internet. And he has this quote in here from a playwright. And the name's not in my notes. I don't have the name, so I don't know. But some playwright wrote this, and he quoted it in his book. This is great. So, I came from a tradition of Western culture in which the ideal was the complex, dense, and cathedral-like structure and articulate personality, a man or woman who carried inside themselves a personally constructed and unique version of the heritage of the West. But now I see within us, myself included, the replacement of complex inner density with a new kind of self, evolving under the pressure of information overload and the technology of the quote unquote instantly available. As we are drained of our inner dense cultural inheritance, we risk becoming quote pancake people, spread wide and thin as we connect with that vast network of information accessed by the mere touch of a button. So I think the idea of the term pancake people always stuck with me. it's I read it years ago, but I just thought, man, like there's a flattening of the core humanity that happens when you are only accessing reality through this thing.
It is so, I mean, I've not heard that quote. I've not heard pancake people, and I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it in so many ways. The heightened distractibility of folks. People can't focus. You know, it's like our brains are being rewired because of all just the input is insane. When you think about how much we're exposed to, and, you know, going back to the kind of work you do, it is a double-edged sword. You know, you're riding that rail between, okay, we you know, there is this humanity here that is, and I think especially with the younger generations, you know, who've come of age, like my children did, like your children are, they never knew a world. They'll never know a world without it. You know, I don't know how old you are, but my generation, I'm a Gen Xer. We remember life before the internet. We remember what it was like to have long stretches of time where you had to use your imagination. You didn't have a device to just plug into and get on a game or go scroll Instagram. Like we rode our bikes, and we were, I mean, I'm younger than Chaz Palminteri, but that life where you were out and we were at the neighborhood into trouble.
We did neighborhood games and manhunt and all that stuff. And we, thankfully, you know, my wife and I talk about it now. We didn't have iPhones in college. The iPhone wasn't available in college, and thank God. I mean, because you had truthfully, I still have a flip phone. I went back. But I love it. I reverted. I had the iPhone for years and I reverted. But in college, you know, we got such a richer experience. You know, you can only text each other where you want to meet. Okay, we'll meet there. And then you go there and you're with each other and you have a human encounter, and you just, you know, you're at a bar with your friends and everyone's talking to each other. And we just missed it. I mean, we just missed that explosion, and we're much better off for it.
Did you and your wife meet in real life?
In college, yeah.
Yeah. Right. And that's a whole other conversation that storytelling can, I think, really help with. You know, there's all these apps now, right, for dating and for meeting people. And to your point about pancake people, I mean, I've heard it, you know, people complaining, I can't meet anybody. And I'm thinking, well, maybe if you got off your app, maybe if you went out and did something. Well, I know the pandemic, I get that. Okay. Pandemic was a different thing, but now that things are opened up again, it's people have to change their behavior. And I still think, and I will go to my grave believing this, is that the way that you meet, whether it's the love of your life or somebody that you can have a relationship with longer than 5 seconds. Okay. You know, something that has substance and depth and meaning. You've got to be in a real place doing a real thing, not on a game, not in this virtual world where you can swipe right and left and there's a gazillion other faces that all begin to blur together. And then it's like, how do you even know what you want?
Right. Yeah. You probably don't want to commoditize human beings on a swipe screen. It's probably not a good strategy for.
It's not. But again, our brain, I don't know, because I'm older and I see what's happening to some people because they have their face in their iPhone all the time. And I'm like, your life is passing you by.
Yeah.
You're missing out. Life is not in your screen.
No, I know. Well, we're tricked. And then you open the screen and you go to it and, you know, we're getting off the rails here, but it's interesting. I mean, you all your apps tend to take you out of the present moment. They either, you know, you look at your calendar, your email, and most of that has to do with obligations you have coming up. So it's just this low grade anxiety that it kind of just sparks in you. Or you look at, they have like the time capsule, you know, you get like your memories of your photos from you know, here's where you were 6 months ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So just your pictures take you to the past. You know, your bank account usually is some indicator of your future. Your weather is telling you what it's going to be like tomorrow. You know, your friends are making plans for the future. So none of it has to do with the present moment. And Walker Percy is one of my favorite writers. He said, the present moment is the only one that touches eternity. And we're losing that. We're losing some ability to be spontaneous, and only to lose time. Time falls away, and you're present. We all have those great moments, where you're doing that, and we're really, I think, annihilating that by being so practical. And the iPhone is the most practical tool that has ever been built in the history of humankind. And I think that there's amazing advantages to that practicality. And certainly it's given us a business model. And certainly it's given a lot of other creative people access to, the masses and finding audiences where they couldn't before. But we're paying a price for that practicality too, I think. And it's a little bit harder to recognize, a little sneakier, and could be a little more sinister if we're not careful.
Right, which let's circle back to your business, Human Factor Media. So very deliberate name, Human Factor, right? So you're very focused on developing videos that, I read it, people actually want to watch. And what are the elements that you've been doing this for 5 years, you said? If you could extract a couple of key, I guess, takeaways for listeners in terms of what makes a video stand out over just, besides you were describing the candle one, like it's purple and it has a wick, okay, we know that in the features, but what are the human factors that really seem to punch people in the face in a good way, kind of make people go, whoa, and lean in? So going back to the work that you do with Human Factor Media, a very deliberate name, Human Factor. What are some of the human factors that consistently show up for, when you're working with clients and just if you have that ingredient in a video, it's going to have a higher probability than not of touching people, causing them to either make a comment or click through or, take some kind of action?
Yeah. So it's a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here, right? I mean, it's finding a way to inject that into a branded story. And you say, well, maybe they don't always belong. These are heavy subjects and these are big ideas, and maybe they don't belong in a story about a battery, which is fair enough. But it's like, if a brand is willing to try to enter into the space of the leisure mindset that a consumer has, then you have to compete with everything else they're competing with. And there's a lot of great stuff out there. So when we think about the individual, we think about what are ways to resonate with the individual. And that's what I think, to your point earlier, that's what great storytelling does and what great literature does. Walker Percy again said that novels are amazing because they're about the science of the individual. Science is an amazing thing, but science can't tell us about the individual. And the novel is the science of the individual. So a couple of things that we would treat as principles. A story is about people. A story is not about a product. So it's usually about, if you're telling a story, it's a story because it's got to do with something people would care about. And this contravenes, a kind of principle that's deeply held in the marketing world, which is that the best way to sell something is to talk about it. We don't think that's true. We think the best way to sell something is to talk about the people that would interact with this thing. Is this appealing to a person or a customer? That would be another principle. If you're treating people as consumers and data points and looking at deals, discounts, limited time offers, talking to them as functions of the market, that's probably going to fall flat, go into the bucket of skippable content. A story about a person who does things and consequences come from those things, and they evoke passion and morals. This kinds of thing appeals to a human being. Another thing is, are you in a rush? If the narrator's voice is cramming words into a 15-second spot that has to be said before you skip it, that's intrusive. That's intention. We're intentionally rushing because we know you're about to click off. And the idea that I think content has to be short is debunked by podcasting, because podcasting is hourly. I mean, it's 3 or 4 hours. Some of the most famous podcasts in the world are 4 hours long. And I know you've been at this a while, Mary Lou, right?
I have. Yeah.
So
my ninth year.
Ninth year is amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. How many, so that puts you 20, like you said, I think you said 2014?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how long do your shows run?
Anywhere from 30 minutes. In the beginning, when I first started out, I didn't have a sense of cadence. And so I listened back to some of those, like anything when you start, I'm like, wow, they're good. They just aren't what they are now. Like our conversation today, to me, is a reflection of how I've matured as a podcaster, and I'm more interested in the dialogue evolving naturally than when I first started. I was very attached to my questions, because that was my framing. And now my average, I would say, is about 45 minutes. But,
Great.
Ours today will be over an hour. And when I look at my stats and when I talk to people in my circle who listen to the show, they'll tell me, man, that one that you had was so-and-so. And I'll look at the length, and it's the longer ones. It's the longer ones. If it's going to be short, this is my theory. I don't have a whole bunch of data, but my theory is if it's going to be short, it needs to be about 5 minutes. Okay. That's a short. If it's going to be, if you're going to go long, long form content, you're looking at 45 to an hour minimum. And I know who you're talking about with those 3 to 4 hour ones. Yeah. Those are unusual. Podcasting has definitely shown a spotlight on what you just said, that people are willing to listen or invest their time into something longer if there's something in it for them, you know, and what is in it for them is going to be different depending on the audience. And I'm sure you guys work with, I was curious, I wanted to ask, do you tend to work with brands that, we think of there's 5 generations alive right now. You've got people in, all the way up in their 80s and 90s who are the silent generation, all the way down to Gen Zers. Skip over that? Or do you look at generational, what audience is primarily?
Yeah. It depends on, it's completely different with who people are trying to reach. Obviously the coveted, I don't even know what the bracket would be. 18 to 34-year-olds is usually what people think of, but it really depends. I mean, we've worked with brands where the target has been very young people who are making decisions about it, who are in high school, and they're trying to, make a case for, let's say, the value of 2-year degrees. And so they want to reach them at a very young age. And so it's, how do you get in front of people who, to your point, they've never known anything but the internet life. So when it comes to reaching different people, right? Different demos. So there's what would be traditionally considered the more coveted 18 to 34-year-old demo, which are, again, people who, they've only ever known life online. So it's a lot harder to do what they would call pattern interruption with people who are that young, because the shock value is just so it's worn away, and they, TikTok is like the Wild West of content. It's a very strange place, possibly the unfurling of our psyches in real time. But that's obviously a very important demo, and there's all these reports on how to reach them and what kind of content they gravitate towards. But I think at the end of the day, they're just like you and me. I think they really value story and the things that make a great story, and awe and inspiration and wonder. And then on the other hand, we've done campaigns that have had to reach folks who are way older, anywhere from as middle-aged all the way up to 65, 70, 75. And the B2B decision makers, when you're doing a B2B campaign, a lot of the C-suite people will be people who've had very long careers, and they're, very impressed with, they're really craving wisdom from their content, and they're craving resonance and things that are going to make them think twice about something they've already kind of relegated to some other corner of their mind. So that can be very challenging too. But it's, I would say we've done campaigns to reach every different kind of user out there.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that the coveted space traditionally in advertising is that 18 to 34 bracket. And the irony is they don't have much money. It's almost like you're being groomed to become consumers. Whereas the, middle age and up, the ones who've had longer careers, who've, put money away or have disposable income, that they're the ones who can go out and buy the luxury vehicle. They're the ones that can go out and invest in, the cruises or, whatever the thing may be. So as you look to the future, I love to ask this question. I know none of us has a crystal ball, Zach, but, what do you see in the next 5 years or so? You brought up TikTok, and that really hit me. What do you see as the future of branded content in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think more and more people will do on whatever scale they can afford to do it. I think more brands will be like Amazon, in the sense that Amazon has created a whole theater section of their website just to be able to sell the products on the other sections of their website. Jeff Bezos famously said, winning Golden Globes helps us sell socks. So they're making content that is not motivated. It's just entertaining. It's not motivated to sell products, but they know that when you become a Prime member to view their content, Prime members shop 3 times as much as non-Prime members. Mm-hmm. So I think setting up those small ecosystems inside a brand, Lexus has a theater page. I think Samsung's making documentaries. I think Red Bull TV. So I think that there'll be a lot of those mid-tier brands, to your point, in markets that are really hard to differentiate yourself based on product, like a sneaker or a mattress or a cereal or a hot sauce or a perfume, where there's a million options. Content is a great way to show what you stand for, what you believe in, why you're different. And so I think that there'll be a lot of just brands treating their pages as theater pages instead of advertising pages. And I think that'll be an exciting transition because it makes people like me more employable.
Absolutely. And for the solopreneurs out there, the small business owners who don't have the huge budgets, who maybe think about like, how on earth would I create a theater room? I mean, what suggestions do you have for people who, again, are independents?
Yeah. Well, I mean, your phone is a camera. I mean, you don't have to have Hollywood production budgets, and we don't typically work with Hollywood production budgets. I think that we're stripping out a lot of the costs that the kind of agency world, the big agency world, layers in with middlemen and things like that. We're trying to production means solving challenges on a budget usually. And so we're trying to find ways to make money go really far. And that's one of the ways we think we differentiate ourselves. But if you're a startup or you're, like you said, a solopreneur, as much as you can inject personality into your social media presence, you're all the better for it. There was an example in Napa Valley of a guy who owned a small winery, and he made videos about, I think it was funny ways to open wine bottles. And he did one of them he like uncorked it with his shoe or something. It went absurdly viral and became, the winery became, part of the folklore of that cool little corner of the internet. And that's how we kind of have to think about it, is we all have our little corner of this thing, and, what's the best way to show who we are. And it doesn't have to be for millions of people. It could be for, 5,000 or 500. And some businesses have been transformed, with way less.
Absolutely. That mega is not necessarily the path to success. You can succeed with a small audience, that's loyal. I've seen it. I've seen it with, I've been introduced to a whole section of YouTube of videos of, makers and people who are into knives and camping, solo camping or extreme camping. It's just fascinating to me. The platforms are out there, and it really, I think people just have to exercise their imaginations. And, to your point, be yourself. Or if you don't want to be yourself, create a bunch of characters, because entertaining, if you're somebody who likes to do that can be part of who you are. So great.
Absolutely.
Oh,
great. Well said.
Yeah. Well, the work you do, Zach, is important. And it's really been a great conversation today. For people who'd like to learn more about you, where do you hang out online?
You can find us at humanfactormedia.co, Human Factor, FACTOR, media, media.co, or you can email me at Zack, ZACK, at humanfactormedia.co. You can also find us on Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn.
Awesome. So those links, team, will be on Zach's show notes page at pyppodcast.com. And if you are, or someone looking to do some stuff that isn't the same old, really want to infuse your brand with some awesome storytelling and just work with a great team of people, reach out to him. This has been such a great depth. Talk about depth. I've appreciated the depth. And before we say goodbye, would you be willing to share with us a couple of books that have been instrumental on your journey to become the human that you are today?
I guess I'll give you fiction and nonfiction, since you're a fellow English major.
Oh, yes.
So I would say, in terms of nonfiction business books, I really loved Sam Walton's Made in America. Thought that was a wonderful story of just an everyday man who built something that was really inspired. I thought he wrote that on his deathbed. So there's all kinds of nuggets in there that are really authentic. So I would recommend that book to anyone who's interested in business at all. I thought that Sven Berkertz is an essayist who wrote a few books. Changing the Subject was a book that he wrote in 2015, and it touches on a lot of the subjects you and I talked about today in terms of trying to remain human and the kind of torrent of the internet and the way that art and attention kind of go together. They're amazing essays. I got to interview him actually, and we have that interview on YouTube. But he's
nice.
He's one of my favorite modern writers. And then fiction. I mean, I've Fitzgerald, Graham Greene, Flannery O'Connor, Ian McEwan. These books, it's Emerson said, I don't remember any books I've read yet they've made me. And it's very, I feel that way about all these books. They're incredibly personal to me. And, I hope I use some small bit of them in this work.
Oh my gosh. Well, Zach, you are truly an amazing human. And I appreciate you taking your time today to talk with me, to share your wisdom that continues to evolve. And, the work you do matters. And I mean, I picked up a lot of really insightful tips today, things to think about. And especially, all the quotes, but the pancake people, gosh, it's been just a delight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary Lou. And thanks for bringing people on here and giving them a chance to tell their story and championing them and making them feel a little better in this small war that we're all in. We appreciate it.
Hey team, Mary Lou here. Who's number one in football changes from year to year. Fashion trends come and go, same with musical tastes. But leadership skills, they never go out of style. In fact, these days, leadership is an essential survival skill for a world that demands more from us than ever before. To succeed these days, you need to know how to show up for yourself so that you can then do the work you love with people you like the way you want. The Play Your Position Leadership Playbook helps you do this, and it's free. Go to pyppodcast.com to download your copy today. If being more successful this year, next year, in the 21st century is on your to-do list, get your copy of the Play Your Position Leadership Playbook now. pyppodcast.com. It's at the top of the page. You can't miss it. That's pyppodcast.com, and start being more of the leader you are meant to be today. This podcast was produced by Daniel Romeros. Show notes for this episode can be found over at pyppodcast.com. I'm Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks for listening.
Here at the Play Your Position podcast, we believe that the road to self-mastery and a life well lived starts with answering the call to leadership. That's when the fun really begins. Send this episode to any friends who might need to hear the inspiration and ideas you heard today. And feel free to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform.